Uh, so welcome to another interview session. This time we're going to be talking about the solstice with Kumu Aʻiaʻi. And I don't know if you want to do a little bit of a short introduction too, just in case folks didn't watch the first video. And then we'll jump into the topic for today.
Okay, aloha mai kako. And by the way, this is Emily Karangawa, and she has her station called HONUA that she doesn't even tell you about herself. But Emily and I have known ourselves for a while, and she's generous enough to have me come and do this little talk about solstice. But I'm Aʻiaʻi Bello, and let's see, I have done as I'm kind of old. So I've done these for a long time. I've worked in the healing of what the area, what I consider, I just say healing arts nowadays, but you know, it started off just with a lot of interest in things that were not your run-of-the-mill things. I got interested in things in parapsychology and you know, all those kind of things from when I was like in middle school. And then I read so much I scared myself, then I totally stopped reading. But I was born and raised here in Hawaii on the island of Oahu. My kupuna are from Maui. And I lived in Europe for 15 years, in Spain in particular. And that was my jumping off ground for many of the spiritual things and of my understandings that I do. I studied spiritual astrology with White Eagle Lodge in England for many years, and that excuse me, and I found that that has really contributed to my foundation in my understanding of cosmogony and universal concepts. But I'm currently a retired DOE teacher, but I kind of retired. I didn't retire early. I just quit, and then I just recently retired. But I continue to work in the healing arts. My business or my organization is called Kalamakula Akea. And basically, I just do whatever my guides tell me to do. Currently, I teach Hawaiian chant, which is oli, and I teach it as pule, and because I'm very interested in the vibration that we are able to create through our voices and through our body by this continued practice. And so that takes me all over, including I went last year to a workshop by Dr. Neil Douglas Klotz, and he is the world-renowned scholar on Aramaic. And I particularly was interested in that because there were words in Aramaic that are the exact same words in Hawaiian. And I'm a Hawaiian language advocate and speaker. And as I continue to look inwardly and to look, I found that one of the ways that I can access our ike, Hawaiʻi, and our ancestral knowledge is through our language and through the sounds of our language. And so solstice is a very, very special time of the year. And not just in modern days, but it's an ancient tradition, and most indigenous and early civilizations all have certain traditions and rituals and ceremony that they do around solstice. So this year's solstice technically is on Saturday, on June 20th. However, as we know, all of these things that have to do with sidereal time and non-clock time don't happen in a moment. There is a buildup, there's a movement of energy, and then there's the decreasing energy. And so it's always in the time around it, prior as well as later. In specific things like an eclipse, it is like in the moment of the total eclipse. So
yeah, because I've heard it described too, like with the, you know, when people are looking at how to use the energy and the metaphor of, you know, full moon and new moon, like that you can actually, you know, 4 days, you know, leading up to and 4 days after, there's still that kind of energy that that you can tap into. You know, people like to use that for manifesting, or people like to use it for, you know, setting intentions and what things that they want to let go of and what things they want to bring in and all of that sort of, you know, yeah, we kind of think in very like strict terms about like this very particular moment. And even I do it. I write down in my little journal that, you know, the moon is full at exactly 4:53 in the morning, you know, that kind of thing. But time is much bigger than just, you know, that point on the clock.
Yeah, and yet by the same token, there is that moment of alignment, right? So for example, when I used to hold women's circles and when I try to hold ceremony, if it is full moon ceremony, I want to be in on the rising energy, because you want that energy. You don't want to be once it's hit its max and it's declining. I don't want declining energy. I want energy that is building. I want energy that is increasing, that is expanding. And so, you know, the more we learn about these things, the more we are able to see how it fits in, because there is a reason and a purpose for everything. And yet there is so much. There is the general flow of energy in the universe. And sometimes that will take precedence whether you're in the exact moment or not. Maybe that's a good way to put it.
Yeah, yeah. So can you describe just kind of briefly, like what exactly does it mean that it's the solstice from like a, you know, from a astronomy perspective, what physically is happening in the solar system?
Yeah, I think that's important to know, because, you know, some people were really good in their science class and they remember, and some people don't. But basically, it is how our perception of the sun and its movement, its north-south movement to us as the earth tilts on its axis. Yeah. So the equinoxes are when the sun is rising. The stars will always rise due east and set due west, first of all. That doesn't change. For us, what's changing is our axis, which makes it seem like our that sometimes it's further north than it is south. And so that's the word equinox, is when the sun rises and sets directly over the equator. And that happens twice a year. And that's usually in March, around the 20th, 19, 20, 21. And the other equinox is in September. And then we have what we call the winter solstice and the summer solstice. So on the equinox, so basically it's as the sun is going and going and going, but the earth is tipping back and forth. And so when we reach the farthest of our tilt, when the earth tilts, basically when it's tilting down or south, the highest point north that its orbit is going to seem is 23 degrees north latitude. So in English, this is known as the Tropic of Cancer. And in Hawaiian, it's Kealopolohiwa Akane. And then when it tips and the sun appears as far south as it could possibly seem to rise and set, that is our Tropic of Capricorn. And that is the Alopolohiwa Kanaloa. And so you can do this and track this from your own house. Like you can just, just watch through the months. You'll notice that the sun will change the direction that it hits your angle. And for me, now I have sun in the back of my house. When we're in the winter time, the sun will always be mostly in the front of my house, and it'll come all the way in the garage because I face south. And then the backyard is only when it's noonday sun, and the minute it starts declining, the sun quickly changes to shade. So we can track this. And then we're so lucky that nowadays it's just tracked for us. So we can punch in on a computer and say, what is summer solstice in the year 2029? And it will tell us. In the year 2029, and you have to say where you are on the planet, right? And then it will tell you the day and the time. And so for that, I'm really grateful, because when I first started studying astrology, there were no, I don't think there were even computers.
Just the analog way.
I had to go and do all the hand calculations, and good thing I'm good at math, because if you're off, and then you really screw up the whole natal chart, right? But basically, so our celebration of solstice is when the sun is gonna rise and set directly over the Tropic of Cancer, or in Hiwakani. Now, for us in Hawaii, the really interesting thing is that Honolulu, for example, is 21 degrees north latitude, and solstice is 23 degrees north latitude. And so it's interesting because we have what you call high noon, or Lahaina noon, where literally the sun is rising, is going to be traveling directly over 21 degrees north latitude, which is where Hawaii lies. And that happens just a little bit before solstice. So for us, it's a very close alignment. It's only two degrees off, and or difference. I don't want to say off, but it's 2 degrees difference. So that's where the sun. So if you're in Kauai, you're actually even closer to when solstice is. And the reason these energies are important is because there is an alignment of the sun and the earth. And in that alignment, energy will flow, gravity will run. And a lot of times those alignments go way beyond out into the universe too. So first into the solar system, and then the galaxy, and then the universe. And so sometimes we have these incredible lineups of planets and everything. So it's a straight line. Mm-hmm. And so we tap into different energies. The energy will flow in a different pattern, in a different way when it's aligned than when it's not aligned. And so solstice is also easily described as the longest day of the year, the most hours of sunlight. And for the countries who are around the, what is it called? The Arctic Circle and the Antarctic Circle, you know, they're the land of the midnight sun. So when the earth is tilting, and when we are in solstice, they have almost 6 months of sun because of the tilt. And it's not full bright daylight sun, but you have that kind of penumbra in between evening dusk that just goes on and on and on and on and on. And so like in those countries, in Spain, you know, it easily in the summertime, it's light till 10 o'clock in the evening, 10:30 in the evening. And so people have those shutters that make your room pitch black to give you that. But also remember that those countries are the cold countries. And so for them to have that much light, you know, and light is connected to heat, is connected to fire, is connected to our maoli. And that acknowledgement of that energy is what is evident in all the old civilizations as well. And so as we are becoming more aware of who we are and of our internal world, of ourselves within and not only without, you know, the word without always makes us feel like we lack. And it's not. It just means it's with us, but from the outside.
I like that.
So when it's with us from the inside, it's closer. It's that much closer, you know? And we feel the difference of when it's outside of us than when it's inside of us. And so hence the word without gives the impression that we're missing something, but we're not. It's just that it is in a different space than where we are. And so, you know, when I speak of akua, when I speak of God, I speak of the God within and the God without. And I personally am really, really comfortable with both, but I like the God within because it's closer. It's closer. It's more accessible to me than something that's far off over there that's supposed to be who, you know. So that means too that if God is in the heaven over there, but I'm looking at the one over here. That means here is heaven. Yeah, it
Yeah.
changes our whole perspective. So solstice is a time of light. And when we just stop and we think, what does light mean? Yeah.
Mm.
In the Hawaiian culture, we say, "Okeao no nakanaka o kapo no nauhane." Yeah, so the daytime is for people, human people, and the nighttime is for the spirits, which is why basically, unless you have specific business or ceremony, once the sun goes down, hey, stay in your hale, and that's their territory. And I remember that as a child. Nowadays, people are out at all hours of the night because we have electric lights, and before, yeah, you could see on a moonlit night, but that's it.
So,
Um, and I believe that you can also see through starlight, but the thing that people forget about using is their own light as a flashlight. And I was taught a lesson on that by my guides many, many years ago. I must have been like what, like 22 or 23 years old.
not that long
And
ago.
and that's a long time ago. That's 40 years ago. 40 years ago, and I had to walk this trek home at night, and it was pouring, rainy, stormy, and I just, you just kind of got scared. And I thought, oh my goodness, how am I going to do this? And then I heard this voice tell me, just turn on your own internal flashlight. And as I did, it's like just the area just around me as I walked lit up, just enough for me to see. And then when I saw that, then I thought, okay, I can make it home. And I walked home. But, these are things that we kind of forget about. So when we think of solstice, we associate it with the light. Yeah. And so in many of the other cultures where they have so much cold, and remember, they have 6 months of darkness. So solstice for them is like, it is the peak of the brightness. It is their full on time of light. And we seek the light. As humans, we seek the light. So all of our external world functions with this light. And so aligning with this energy gives us the ability to tap into our external as well as our internal energies, if that makes sense.
Mm.
And so like Kalenu Uhiwa says, this is the time for you to reassess. This is what our aliʻi in Hawaii would do. And I want to acknowledge her because, I am still learning. And
Yeah,
I
she's
want to be,
amazing.
huh?
She's amazing. Her
Oh,
work.
she is. And she's so humble. But I think we should all be the eternal students. Because as long as we are, then we have a chance to grow. When we think we know everything, then there's no growth because somehow there's an automatic barrier. But anyway, Clay says that this time is a good time to reassess your resources. This is when the aliʻi would take survey of their land and of their people and see, okay, what do we need? Do we need to start any major projects? And if so, do we have the resources? If not, how do we get ready to have those resources? And interestingly enough, like with COVID here and the amount of unemployment and adjustments, financial, economical, children home, children not home, a disruption to what was our status quo, it is a good time to assess. For example, some people assessed at the threat of a hurricane and thought, I don't have food, I don't have water, oh no, Walmart, the shelves are empty, the lines are long in Costco, right? So there's some people who just went crazy and they got all worried. Other people, they were the ones in their car fighting in the line, but they got everything that they needed, right? But the thing is, did we learn from that? So when COVID came along, did we already have our supply and our stash? Or did we face the exact same thing again? Did we not learn our lesson, so we have to learn it a second time?
Mm.
Now, I believe in food storage. I am a member of the Church of Jesus Christ, and they teach us to be prepared, kind of like the Boy Scouts, be prepared. And so I have food storage. So when all of that happened, I can go, oh, okay, that's good. That's good. But this year, it caught me off guard because I was getting ready for equinox and we had big time ceremony in equinox, and I kept putting off going to Costco because I hate going to the store. And so all of my major purchases I didn't do, and it was like, okay, but I still had food storage and I was still good, but I could have kicked myself because then, and somebody finally ended up going for me and everything. But it's one of those things. And so in our lives right now, it's like we're finding that we are living on budgets that we didn't have. When COVID came around, it was my understanding that things will never ever be the same again. We cannot expect to go back to the status quo. That became apparent actually like maybe 10 years back, where everybody seemed to get so busy, and it's like everybody's waiting for that brief reprieve when things go back to normal, and then we'll worry about this, or then we'll take care of that. But did you notice that never happened?
Never happens. I keep telling myself the same thing. Oh, I'm gonna catch up, and then as soon as I get like that first, like a good week in of actually sleeping, and I catch up on my emails, and then but it's got to be a new pattern, otherwise we're going to keep doing the same thing over and over again, right? So unless we're ready to change the way that we operate, we're going to keep doing that same cycle.
And I think and right now I don't even know if it's willing. It's kind of by force, a lot of things. And that's why you talk about living in the now, living in the present. It is so important to do that. It's so important to, when you get the prompting to call somebody or to check up on somebody or to do this, that we listen to that. We have a habit of procrastinating. We're just really, really good at that. Students are so good. I am a crammer, last minute crammer for exams. I can never be where I study through the whole thing and then all of a sudden. And I'm just lucky because I have a good memory. What about you, Emily? Are you procrastinating?
I'm a little bit of both, but I've been mostly procrastinating. But it's like it's the overwhelm. It's the like I give myself too much to do to begin with. And then I stress myself out because I want like every single thing that I do to be super like high quality. I want to meet all of my deadlines, my expectations, all the things. But then, so then I wonder like, oh, well, I haven't slept and somehow all these things have fallen off my plate. Like, what happened? Like, what do I think happened? So it's like, you put it off because you're overwhelmed, and then you feel bad because you put it off and you still need to do it, and then it just reinforces itself. So it's very frustrating. It's challenging to work myself into a new habit. I'm slowly, certain things are getting better, but yeah, it takes some heavy lifting work to do.
Well, actually, now, for example, if we are confronted with those things, now is a really good time to look at those things and say, okay. And one of the things that I have had to learn, and it took me 60 years to learn, is that it's okay. It's okay. Because I'm very similar to Emily. And when I take on something, it's like I dive in head first and take it all. Like I decided I was gonna learn how to speak Hawaiian, and I did. The next thing you think, I was in the immersion school. I was the after school aide who couldn't speak. Then I was the after school care who could speak, and then I was the substitute teacher. And then the next thing you know, I'm teaching, and then I still had to go learn Olelo because I never did it in college. I have 2 degrees in Spanish. And so, it's really interesting. But one of the things that I have learned is that what we don't like to do is set our priorities. And we think the more, the better. So the more projects, the more things we're doing, the better. And the other thing is like, there is so much to learn and so much to do. And it is all so exciting and stimulating and fascinating that how can you do just one? It's like the Lay's potato chip. How could you eat just one? So we take one and we think, okay, we're going to do this. And then something else comes along and it's like, oh my goodness, I have to do that. Look, this opportunity, I can't let it go by. But in the past, there are times when, you know, as a single parent, I wasn't able to do everything I wanted in the time frame that I would have liked to do it. And that was the beginning of my understanding of how the universe works. That at any given moment, we are in a state of perfection for everyone to learn the lesson that they're supposed to learn. Now, you might not like that state, you might not like the circumstance, but if we can accept that, it helps us to get through the hard times. And it also helps us to say no when it's time to say no, because it's just too much. You know, it's like, I would love to be flying back and forth to Maui again, but I can't because it's not time. I was very tempted. I was going to go there for 4th of July weekend. But I had to say no because the pule that I'm doing with my Papa Oli is more important. So, you know, so setting priorities is one thing. The other phrase that will help us is just to know that, you know what, it's okay. It's totally okay to say no. I'm too old. I didn't go through the DARE program in school, but many of you guys, 8th grade, DARE program, and the officer, whatever officer comes and talks to you, you know, I used to take the kids and let them go. And it was just say no, right? That was the slogan, just say no. And I've had to do that self-talk to me through these last 20 years. Like, just say no. It's okay. It's totally okay to say no.
It's funny they don't say just say no, thank you.
Yeah, the thank you is nice. The thank you is nice because that adds a little bit more humanness to it. And it's not like a flat out, but you know, for people who have never say no because they don't want to disappoint people, that's a push to have them say thank you to. They need to just make the statement and get out of there. But
and
anyway,
can say too, you know, you can just say that, you know, it's not no because I don't care that I, you know, that's, you know, not something that I think is worthwhile. It's just me looking at my capacity and my priorities, you know, it's just not feasible. I would love to, but, you know, maybe there's a recommendation for someone else who can or something like that, you know, just so people know that it's not, you know, I mean, I know that's something that I worry about, you know, personally. I know a lot of other people feel that same way too. It's like, you know, I want to say yes, but I know that I have to say no. But that doesn't mean that I don't love and support and, you know, think that that task is important or that work is important. So,
well, you know, that's a really, it's also an opportunity for us to get a grip on the ego. Because there's a part of our ego that tells ourselves that, you know, you should do it because you can. Well, you know what? We have the ability to do so many things because we know inwardly, we know our potential, which is limitless. And yet we are in the limited human state of only being able to do so many things. And that's the conflict there. That at the same time that we know all that we're capable and have the potential to do, somehow we bypass that acknowledgement that, but in human form, you cannot always exercise all your potential because you're dealing with 3 dimensions. You're dealing with a limited space. And there are those of us and other people who defy those states. However, the world functions on that. Although we're heading in the other direction, we're not there yet. And so, you know, the ego says, oh, but you got to do this. You got to do this because this. And one of the lessons is, no, we don't have to do it because if we don't do it, someone else will do it. And we have to trust that they can do just as good a job, if not better than we can. And right there is the crux, is that we don't trust. We think that we are the only one who can do it, and we're going to do it because we know this and we can do this. You know, it's like my students. I would tell them,
So
oh, you know,
true.
it's so easy to teach children compared to adults, because the children, you're trying to get them to think. And then the adults, they think that they can think. And that's just it. They always overthink. You know, you ask a yes or no question, and you got to ask it 5 times to get a yes or no answer, because
I know
they
you
have all their explanations. They can answer a simple yes or no question, and they're already giving you a sermon. And you repeat the question, and they give you another one because they thought, okay, what they said before wasn't good enough. So you repeat it again until you explain to them, can I just get a yes or a no? And then they stare at you, but I was trying to answer you. You know,
it's
and that is
so,
the ego
so
talking. That is the ego wanting to be acknowledged, wanting to be recognized. And we all have that. We all have that. But for those of us who are trying to move beyond that, trusting, you know, trusting that the universe is in a state of perfection, trusting that we've been given the opportunity, but you know, when we're honest with ourselves and, you know, I just have too much on my plate, I can't do it, then let it go. Let it go. Give somebody else the opportunity to shine and to develop those skills and to do that. And you know, there's nothing wrong. And the way the universe works is that if you don't do it, somebody else will. um and part of our learning is like, you know, there are things, and you know, such as windows of opportunity, and that's where we have our choice to choose. We have free agency. And so whatever we choose to do and which windows we choose to go through, that's our choice. And believe it or not, that is the only thing we control. We don't control anything else except that. And we thought we controlled everything else. But that's all that we control, to choose. Okay, am I
so
gonna,
hard.
am I
It's
not
so
gonna?
hard to so hard to accept that. And you know, I try. I'm working on it.
No, but you know, it's, if to be able to say that it's hard to accept that also is a sign that we are opening our inner world, because we know our potential. We know we can do this. We know if we put out this much effort, we can accomplish this. We just can't do it all right here and right now. And you
and I
know,
think
it's hard to accept that from a human standpoint.
yeah.
But humanity is changing and we are progressing. And that's why these times like solstice, where we can align our energies and acknowledge kaneho'alani, the sun and the light and everything that the light represents to us. It's incredible,
And
because we
that's what,
begin to see our opportunities. Yeah, sorry, I didn't mean to cut.
yeah, no, I wanted to let you finish too. That but you know, also, you know, kind of related to, you know, when we were talking earlier about you know, what is enlightenment, and that it's not this, it's not some like static thing that you achieve that's, you know, this ethereal, you know, lovey-dovey feeling. It's like, it's the work, it's the constant work and awareness, and responding to like challenges all the time, but doing it, you know, from a place where, you know, like you're saying, like you're pulling your fortitude, you're pulling your alignment from within, and not looking, you know, to the outside so much either. So just
Yeah.
yeah, and just
Yeah,
good
that
to
enlightenment, but you know, it's you hit it right on the head. You know, nothing in the universe is static.
mm,
We like to think it is. That's why we were all waiting for our brief reprieve that never came. We like to think that it is. And for me, my greatest challenge right now is to accept that what I thought was a state of being a static situation is actually an ever-changing dynamic situation. So just the mindset, you know, just trying to accept that even we as humans, watch this. I'm not the same person who is just talking to you. Every time we take a breath in, we have the ability to recreate our energy, ourself, and to realign with the universe. And then we breathe outward and we let go of the past and what the patterns, the things that we were doing. And so that's why, you know, focused breathing is so important, right? Because what happens in that breath, we are actually reconstructing ourselves into this ever-changing dynamic ball or person of energy. And, you know, as we interact with others and at the same time move within the flow of the universe, that's why solstice is important, so that we can, it's kind of like a road check. Yeah. How are we doing? What do we need? Where should we focus our energy? You know, sometimes you think that it's all going to go there to a certain place, and at the last minute you realize no. And so in those cases, the question is, are we brave enough to say no and pull out? Or are we just going to go through with it because I said I was going to? You know, one of my students who was a Gates scholar, Lila Akin, she just was the most outstanding student that I have ever seen. And she was, you know, she early on, she started like a career in filming and she got her degree. And she was ready to go to USC, to the best graduate program across the nation. And she felt the call to her indigenousness of her Native American from her dad's side. And she dropped everything, left that, which the program is so hard to get into, and she went back to Maine to find her roots. And I have so much respect and admiration for her to do that, because a lot of people wouldn't have done that. So solstice is a really good time, you know, and because it's about the light, it's good to look at the external things in our life, you know, check out your house, check out your yard, your car, get your safety check, do all those kinds of things that you need to do, and make sure that those are on track. Because then when we come to winter solstice, it's about the least amount of light, which automatically, again, turns us into the inner worlds, back into pole. So if we can look at summer solstice as or daytime, daylight, and winter solstice as pole. And so we're going to be addressing different kinds of things that we assess in our lives. Yeah. And so the energies that go into that, a lot of times, you know, in the olden days, things depended on the weather, it depended on the crops, it depended on the food. And so all of those kinds of things were assessed. You know, what will it take for the village to get through one more year? How, you know, what are all the signs in the clouds? Is the weather, are we going to have enough rain? Are we having a good year for crops? All of those kinds of things. Also, government-wise, is everything functioning? You know, do we need to go make any major repairs, major constructions? And or are we going to war? So if we're going to war, do we have what we need? Do we have weapons? Do we have resources? Do we have people? You know, so many questions. And in our lives, maybe it's not, are we going to war? But it's like, are we going to make any main changes in our life? That now with COVID, we see, because we're enlightened, we see that this aspect of our life, I would like to see it more like this, or I want to change it like this. I don't want my children to be just bored out of their mind because they can't be with their friends. So then my plan would be to try to get to know my children better and try to figure out what can they do and to become that independent person that can entertain themselves, or as well as how can I nurture a relationship with them, so that because we have more time where we can engage, What are we going to engage in? You know, that's a major, major thing to deal with, right?
Yeah, and it makes me think too, you know, something that, you know, you were saying a few minutes ago, like, you know, we think of these states that, you know, even as we're evaluating, like, what is it that is working or not working, and what would we like to see, we kind of think of those also as these static points where, like, I'm gonna achieve health, I'm gonna achieve, you know, stability, I'm gonna, you know, whatever is that static thing, but it's none of those things are static, and it reminds me again of, you know, our conversation earlier um, about maintaining, creating, holding and protecting a vibration that is high enough that you know, COVID or, you know, any of these, like, physical and, you know, more than physical um, threats, like, can't sustain themselves in, you know, in our physical bodies, um, and so yeah, just looking at how we can use the time of solstice to, again, like, reinforce this idea that we need to be creating a vibration and be, like, using that using that to respond to all of these goals that we're having in mind, all these evaluations and assessments that we're making, how we, like, bringing that awareness to the actual creation of the things that we want, and not treating it as something that we're just going to achieve all of a sudden and then the work is done. Where if we're talking about enlightenment, we're talking about the work throughout our lives and beyond. You know.
Yeah, and you know, about I see now I'm losing track of time, right? Like maybe about 10
I
years,
know.
10 years, 12 years in my women's circles, I started asking the question of the evening was, so what are your daily spiritual practices? You know, not religious practices, but what are your daily spiritual practices? Because a lot of people, it's like we have a lot of um, mundane, worldly, physical world practices that we do every day. But for a lot of people, the only daily spiritual practice they came up with was pray. And that's all they could, that would encompass their mind. However, I bet you if I asked that same question again, people would have more to say than just pray. So we're going to see. I'm going to ask you that, Emily. What are some of your daily spiritual practices that you may have developed or begin to implement during COVID or even in this time prior, let's say from 5 years back to now?
So I think during COVID in particular, I think the main thing that's been um, that I've been trying to be consistent about practicing is the daily morning oli. And sometimes, you know, sometimes I don't always make it in the morning, but I make it, like, you know, as soon as I'm up, or I'll do it during sunset. So that's something specifically more recently that I've been practicing. But even before that, you know, a few years ago, I made a commitment, like my New Year's resolution, that, like, I'm going to make sure that I smudge in the morning and before I go to bed, and make sure that even if I just do it for, like, even just a moment, whether I verbally say something or I just think it in my mind, like, let me be grateful to my ancestors, let me be in connection with them, and communion with them in some, you know, even the smallest way, just so I can just, I mean, kind of similar to, you know, taking a moment to breathe and bringing yourself into the present moment. And for me, like, smudging is what helps the most. Um, and and then also, just, I don't get to do it as often, but you know, any place that I get to go, you know, in nature, is like, I love my alone time. I really do. I value it so deeply. Um, and if I have, you know, if I have the time to just sit and let the cacophony in my mind just go, that's also helpful. And I think, you know, also recently, like, allowing myself to cry more is also part of the release, because, you know, if I think about it, you know, when I was, you know, like just small kid time, for I think until middle school, um, I prided myself on how much control I had over my emotions and letting people, um, making sure that other people didn't see whether or not I was like angry or sad. And I would reserve those, those moments like for myself, like, when I got home and was going to bed or something like that. And so now I think I'm giving myself permission to actually feel my feelings and process those through, because that's, I mean, it gets back again to the intergenerational trauma that we're trying to cope with and again, like, feel all the way through so that we can change that, so that we can be done with that, um, and find something, new to do and be and create, um, on our behalf and behalf of all the ancestors before us and everybody to come after. So I think those are the main things that kind of come to mind that I'm working on.
Yeah, and I think I've known you for more than 5 years now. You really, everybody. I don't want to say you and not me or anything like that, but you know, deep, deep change. And I look at it as healing. I look at it as accepting myself, but I also look at it as self-love. We have a really difficult time with loving ourselves. We're really good at loving everybody else, but to love and to embrace yourself in your entirety with your faults and acknowledge them and not be repulsed or upset or try to shift the focus, shift the blame. That's hard work, but it's very rewarding work, because I can tell you that what it does bring is it brings you inner peace. It brings you a kind of joy where, like, when you're just pounding kappa all by your lonesome at home and you just have this smile plastered to your face, and you do just because you're happy. You know, there is like a joyfulness I feel, and I felt even more so during this time of COVID. Um, my my aligning myself to the cycles of nature, I think, has helped. I we were the commuting family driving everywhere to get the kids to Kapu, and basically all we did was sleep, shower, and that few hours in our house, then we were off again. We were almost probably in our van more of the time than we were in the house. And you know, my yard is a beautiful place to be. But since I started putting more energy and planting more native plants and everything, the energy of the house, also since I painted my house the salmon colored pink, um, the vibration that surrounds me has changed, because I deal with all of my things. People come to me, whereas before I would always go out to people, and I was kind of leery to have people come always to my house, because my house is my sanctuary, and it's like I just didn't want any kind of energy and any kind of people there. But by working on myself, I'm able to hold this space, that is a very healing space for people to come into too, and therefore the work that I do is more effective. um I've always had people, the people who have come, people that you work on and they fall asleep and they just sleep for hours, and so you just let them sleep, and then when they wake up they go, why didn't you wake me up? And I go, because sleep is healing, you know but we all are constantly doing this. It's not that some people are exempt, or if they're really smart, or they seem really spiritual, or they seem like they have their act together. They might seem like they have their act together, but in their own brain, they're still bridging that gap of everything that they have the potential to do and all the knowledge that they do carry in their DNA, um, to having it function on a physical, mundane, day-to-day level. And when we make shifts, the spiritual permeates through everything. But because the physical world is more limited, the shifts that we make in those things don't necessarily permeate into everything else. And they don't seem to be as long lasting. So solstice, what is solstice? You know, there's those 4 times of the year. I like summer because everybody likes summer. Who doesn't like summer? Beach, you know, beach, water, fun, barbecue. Everybody has good memories of summer. Um, in Europe, on summer solstice, it kind of would coincide with Father's Day, which is El Dia de San Jose. And that's when they would make these huge bonfires that would light up the countryside. It was also the time when all the young people would go and hook up. So there was all these dances, there were fires, there were things, and people would hook up because they said that all the babies that were made on solstice or las noches de San Juan, that those children would be special children, that they were connected to the universe and to the stars in a different way. I mean, there are even songs about that, you know, and so, you know, for the people, the Druid people and other peoples who celebrated solstice, they just celebrated light. It's kind of hard to go through 6 months of darkness. Because humans, basically, the day was made for humans. Yeah. So a pole, it precluded everything or preceded everything. And the day and akua and the light, everything, that was when humanity and so humans. And so that's a part of us. And so they would light the fires and say, this is to scare away the demons of the dark and of the winter, when they had to scrounge for food, when everything in life was much harder because the sun was not prevalent. And so, you know, everywhere you go in the world, there are solstice stories. Maybe Emily, you can ask and see if other people want to come and share their cultural solstice stories. But
Yeah,
basically,
I mean,
that's it. Let's
yeah,
reassess. Yeah. Okay. Let me go ahead. Go ahead.
oh yeah, yeah. So yeah, I was gonna say, I was like, there's so much we could we can go on for hours, and we have before. um, but yeah, I'm hoping this will actually be posted before solstice this weekend, so people can have a chance to really or you know, people who might just need the reminder can take that. And I think, you know, part of my main hope too with you know, putting this discussion out there is that people will just be reminded that, you know, these universal, like, natural markers of time are really really important. They're not arbitrary, that they're actually there to offer support, especially in a time like this where we can use all the support that we need, and we're trying to basically build a new world that that doesn't just help us all survive, but actually, like, supports our thriving and supports our belonging to the earth and supports our belonging to one another. So um, yeah, just this one little piece and offering, you know, toward that ideal and toward that goal.
Yeah. So maybe the last thing I want to touch on before we end is the fact that, you know, we are recreating in ourselves. We are in the process with every breath we take, creating the person who we'll be, the person, that sovereign being that we need. And humanity is just, you know, like we said in the very beginning, humanity is going to be reborn into unity through diversity, whether we like it or not, whether a specific government likes it or not, whether people protest and try to hold on to old things or not. That's coming. So we all know that when there is a flow of energy, you can go with it or you can resist it. And you know, it's sometimes we might feel like we're just lost. We're giving up everything to go into the flow. And then once you're in the flow, it's like, oh, this is not so bad, right?
Yeah, yeah,
But we also have been brainwashed to resist. You know, the civil unrest that exists now is because the people are becoming aware. People are being enlightened. People are saying no to things that in the past they would have turned their heads to. And specifically in the United States, and I say this because this is where I was educated. This is where Hawaii is the education I received. This is, you know, people have a habit of just looking the other way and thinking somebody else is going to take care of it. There's no personal accountability. And that's what Kapu Aloha taught us on the mauna. Is Kapu Aloha is not just how you treat somebody else. It's your accountability to yourself to be able to treat other people as if they were yourself. And so when we hold ourselves accountable, it's not a bad thing, but mentally, psychologically, we think it's a bad thing. So we need to like relook at all of those little things, and we need to each become sovereign. We cannot speak of sovereign nations if we don't have sovereign individuals and sovereign communities. And so, you know, and sovereign, my working definition of sovereign is to know who you are and to be responsible for the choices you make and the consequences that come after. You might not like them. They might not be, quote, good consequences. But when you're true to yourself and when you're true to the truth and you make those decisions, knowing that it's not going to be liked by and accepted by everybody. But when you can stand for that and do that consistently for the good of Mother Earth, for the good of society, when we can look beyond. And again, I want to reiterate that, you know, there's all these things in the news that seem so negative. And yet in Hawaii, I have seen so much good and positive. I've seen like the good sides of people come out instead of the negative sides. I've seen people lending a helping hand, people just waiting to serve. And I, you know, I'm an advocate for Mauna Kea Pua cases, my dear, dear friend, and I support her always through Pule. And I know that the whole Mauna movement was a catalyst for people to begin to think in this way, to serve others in a way that is selfless, and yet to be responsible for your own education, for your own learning, for your own constantly seeking to better yourself, to seek out those spiritual truths, to follow the teachings of our elders, and to be open to learning. There's so many changes, and we are in the middle of that. This is the most exciting time in the world, you know, in all of my years on this planet. And I have been through, my life is very exciting, it's very eventful, but you know, the point that we are at and what is happening here, births are always exciting. And you know, I had the opportunity to chant babies into the world. And we have this opportunity to chant the birth of humanity, the rebirth of humanity. And so for those of us who oli, right, Emily? For those of us who oli, we are just chanting our hearts out. And it's because we can create a vibration and try to hold that vibration. And by doing that, we're not creating a static vibration, but we are creating movement. Yeah. And so thank you so much, Emily.
Thank you so much. That, I feel like that's such a succinct way of describing, you know, not only what, you know, what the nature of the work that we have to do collectively, especially now, but also just like my, you know, my own intention and my own hope for, you know, doing this kind of creative channel and just kind of experimenting with you know, putting things out there where, you know, this is as much, you know, a tool for, you know, my own practice and healing and learning as, you know, for everyone else who can benefit from it. So I like I love the way that you put that at the end. So I think that's a really good way to close it out.
Okay. Well, mahalo. We'll see you
Oh,
next time.
mahalo. Next time.